Okay, cool.
All right, everybody, welcome to the last session of the first day of the Fundraising Career Conference. This is Mazarine Trays of Wild Woman Fundraising and the founder of the Fundraising Career Conference. It's our second year that we're doing it. And I am so happy to say that this year's panel on how to be a more successful nonprofit consultant is going to be so much better than last year's. It's pretty much like night and day. We have so many more topics we're covering, and each presenter is going to be covering about 10 minutes worth of material. They're going to have slides. You're going to get all the recordings and the slides by April 15th, but you will be able to have access to the slides after the last session on the last day on the 8th. And thank you so much for being here. If you're having any trouble with the audio or the visual, you may want to restart your computer okay, it sounds like I'm not the only one. Other people are having a hard time hearing me. So what I'm going to do is introduce Tom Ahern, and then I'm going to see if I can connect with my phone instead. Just really briefly, Tom is he has authored 4 well-received books on donor communications, with 2 more in the pipeline. And each year he delivers dozens of workshops internationally, speaking at conferences in the Netherlands, Belgium, Australia, New Zealand, Italy, and many more. And Tom will be asking, is consulting for you? So now, Tom, I'm going to control the slides for you. You're unmuted. And
Yeah, I'm ready. Okay, what am I looking at? By the way, Mazarine, the sound is awful. You kept cutting in and out. And so you were talking. And so, you know, here you are, you're consultants. You all want to be making money independently of evil overseers and dark overlords and toxic workplaces, which is what I escaped from, although I must say.
All right, everybody, how's that? Is that better?
You're back.
I'm back. Sorry about that. This happens sometimes.
Quick poll. What else you got for me?
Yeah, so we get the poll. Where are you at? We're going to close it. We're going to share it. 44% of us have voted. 59% of us are curious about consulting. 22% are planning to be consultants. 13% are consulting on the side, and 6% are consulting full-time. Is that audio okay?
Yeah, now it sounds great. Can you hear me okay?
Okay. Oh, yeah, very well.
Yeah,
very well.
On the phone headset. Okay, so show me a slide, and I'll comment on it. Okay, so are you cut out for consulting? I got to say that suggests that there's one cookie cutter, and you can buy it maybe at, I don't know, someplace, and Bed and Bath and Beyond, that will be you as a consultant, and that is never going to be the case. It's going to be you being a consultant, but there aren't really any rules. Now, I did, when I started being kind of risk averse or failure averse, I did listen to audio tapes about how to run or how to grow a consulting business, and I mentioned audio tapes so you know how old I am, and it was extremely helpful. Read one book about how to do this as a business, because once you do that, you'll have kind of a plan in place. My the advice was, as a kind of a general rule, read all the time. And so here's my first slide. Are you cut out for consulting? Get good and get fired. I was very good at what I was doing, and it was killing me. Very high-powered international technology firm, and you know, I mean, it was a place where ugly personalities went to thrive. So, and including me, I sucked as being a manager. So, while I made good money and while I learned stuff there, basically, don't be afraid of anything. It was important to get out before you just had that massive heart attack. So I was fired in a palace coup, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I had built up a department. I had learned all sorts of stuff. And now I'm really ready for a next step, not working with jerks. Yeah. So how about that next slide? Let's see what we got. I don't remember these actually. Oh, are you kind of six? Oh, okay. So among the kinds of advice I got was, as I mentioned, don't stop reading. And one of my advisors was really good. He said, if you read 1 hour a day in your specialty, whatever that is, you will be an expert within a year, which was a terrific promise. And he said, if you continue to do that as a general practice, you'll be a national expert in about 3 years. And I thought, God, I can do that. That's just 3 years away. And and it is my practice till today. I start every day by reading and buying books on Amazon, some of which I read. And, you know, they're coming in. I'm looking around my office here. I've got 450, 500 how-to books on the shelves. My wife, who's also a nonprofit consultant, has hundreds more. Between the two of us, that's kind of library you build up when you're trying to not disappoint your clients. I mean, basically, you say yes, and then you find out how to do it. That's another piece of advice from experience. Oh, the other piece of advice from experience is whatever your estimate is, double it. You will definitely use up that time. Okay, what else we got? Fix your weaknesses. Okay. In this case, I could tell I had one big problem that would get me in trouble eventually, and that was I hate paperwork. Hate like in can't stand it. Like in don't feed me those wiggly worms. Like in you know, whatever. And I figured I'd end up in prison if I was doing my own taxes and all that kind of stuff. And I am a corporation, which is not the way everybody goes, but that's what I decided to do. A corporation has one signal advantage. It kind of protects your house. In case somebody sues you, they can't get deep enough to take away your assets. And that was fine. That's all I wanted to do was have a little thin, brittle layer of protection. Nobody has ever sued me, frankly. Nobody has ever asked me to sign a confidentiality agreement. Well, they did, but you know, I don't pay too much attention to it. And but what I needed was somebody to keep the trains running, keep all my books in order. And my biggest single expense as a consultant is my accountant. I pay them about $500 a month, and I've been doing that for over a decade, 15 years, because what happens, I get audited. I got audited by the state government, which is desperate for more money, and came out squeaky clean, and thanks to them. So it's very worth the money. What else you got?
Oh, yeah, let's see what else we got here.
Let's look at some of these people. Yeah, I'm looking through here, seeing who is. Okay, so I've got some. I rounded off to I'm standing on the shoulders of at least 1,000 mentors. The nonprofit industry has been it's different because everybody's really happy to talk to you or share with you what they know. And I will call people that to me are really, really famous people, and they'll just immediately answer with a very well-informed answer. So I'm looking at these people, and Linda, I know, and she's been a mentor, and Mazarine, you've been a mentor, and Sheena Greer, you've been a mentor, Mark Pittman, one of my favorite people on the face of the earth. You know, if you want to get locked into a bomb shelter for 30 years with enough food and drink to survive, it would be with Mark Pittman. The bow tie, not sure, but that's him. That's his trademark. Claire Axelrad, I am coming to the conclusion is the smartest person in fundraising. Every time I read one of her blogs and I kind of mentally compare it to one of my e-newsletters, I think, oh God, you're such a lazy bastard. Claire has put so much work into this, and she's just brilliant. So, you know, of the people you're seeing on the screen here, there are several that I just open automatically, whatever they send me. By the way, that photo's about 15 years out of date. I used to look that way. Okay, what else you got? Well, now you've met my dog, and actually not just my dog, but my guru and my priest. And you know what he is would be telling you if you could hear him the way I can, is that change be coming. And you know, I have specialized in probably a dozen things by now. And my trajectory has been from, oh yeah, I can do that, and then go, you know, buy a book that tells me how, which is kind of when you need money, you will do whatever job comes in the door, to now, because I've published a bunch of books and I can be somewhat selective about clients. In other words, the right people find me for the right reasons. Now I can start to specialize in start to do the things I want to do. So what I want to do is cases for capital campaigns. They, you know, by and large are mediocre, and they by and large are meant to not offend anyone, and that's fine, because you know, the case is not going to decide whether the campaign meets goal or not. But I just thought there's room in this world for interesting capital campaign cases. I just don't ever see them. So that's what I'm trying to write, the very donor-centered, that make the donor the hero, et cetera. Just different, you know, not bragging on about the organization, you know, what I want to do. The other thing I do, well, a couple of other things, is direct mail, which I try to limit because it's terrifying. And, you know, within 3 weeks, whether you're an idiot or a genius, and it's just, I can't do too much of it in a year because it's anxiety producing. And the other thing are audits, which, you know, I am now equipped to do because I've written 5 books. But that is part of that, you know, read an hour a day forever, because what you sell as a consultant is your expertise. The people in-house, they're the frontliners. They don't have time to read, etc. And so that's where you step in.
Good. I am. I'm drinking tea. And Sherelle has a question. She asked, what's the appropriate hourly rate for beginner in consulting? Should we charge per project or strictly hourly?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
I'll tackle it. You got other people on this line, though, and I'm sure
yeah,
they have opinions too.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I just had a little secret discussion, because I think it's against the law, with John Lepp up at Agents of Good about billing rates and so forth. And, you know, we're not colluding, so the federal government can take a hike. And I basically charge by the hour, and that's because my projects tend to be rather open-ended. We don't know going in how long it'll take, and so I like to get compensated. I have a timer. I live my life by a timer. It's set at 16 minutes, and every time 16 minutes go off, I charge the client for 15 minutes. John Lepp, on the other hand, basically their agency always charges by the project, and you know, if you're comfortable doing that, the only thing about project work is that you know, the tendency is to lowball it, because you're more likely to win the bid, maybe, or, you know, whatever. You don't want to surprise them. After all, they are, you know, tender nonprofits, and I don't, you know, that kind of basically it just kind of screws the consultant, not the client. So I'd rather have them just pay for every bloody minute, every 15 out of 16 minutes I spend on their project.
Yeah, I agree. So that's actually all the time we have for you right now, Tom, but thank you so much. Yay! We're going to get on with Lynn Dean now. So really, really appreciate you giving us your expertise.
Hold, or do you want me to go away now?
Good question. People may have questions for you at the end. I'm going to mute you, but if you want to stick around until 3 o'clock, we're going to take the questions. If that's okay with you, you can listen in. Would you like to?
Okay. Yeah.
Right on.
Very much so. Okay.
Thank you so much. All right, Lynn, you are up. Thank you so much.
Hi. I am so excited to be with everyone. I'm Lynn Dean, and my consulting practice is Dean and Associates, and we specialize in capital and endowment campaigns and board training. We are very involved in working with boards on fundraising and governance. I also serve as Director of Institutional Advancement for Northwest Vista College, which is one of a system of 5 community colleges in San Antonio, Texas. My experience includes working with 2 consulting firms, CCS, one of the largest firms in North America, and Custom Development Solutions. And I worked with these 2 firms for a total of about 5 years. And the way that I started with CCS is that I kept seeing them at the Association of Fundraising Professional Conferences, and I would always stop by their booth and talk with them about the campaigns that they were doing. Then one year I stopped by their booth. The next afternoon I interviewed with them, and 2 months later I was doing my first campaign feasibility study for them. I really totally love working on capital campaigns. It's a time when nonprofit organizations are thinking big and trying to do something just really extraordinary. And my passion is working with them and doing everything that I can to make them successful. And then my latest endeavor was to co-author a book with Linda Lysakowski, one of my mentors, and the book is called Nonprofit Strategic Planning, Develop a Plan That Will Actually Be Used. So on the next slide, we're going to talk about things to consider in consulting. And I think the words of Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind, are very helpful and really, really apply here. So let's take a moment and think about, why do nonprofits hire consultants? And most importantly, how would you fit into that picture? Nonprofits hire consultants for a variety of purposes. And on the next slide, we're going to look at those purposes. An organization may be considering a new fundraising strategy, but say the leadership really wants an independent perspective on how well it might work. Or an organization might engage a consultant to launch or fix a stalled capital campaign. Also, an organization may decide to apply for a grant requiring an extensive written application, and the organization just simply doesn't have anyone on the staff with the expertise and/or the time to prepare the grant. Generally, what I find is that nonprofits engage consultants to really free up time from managers and directors, or to provide expertise in an area in which the organization is lacking. On the next slide, we'll look at how to decide whether to work for a consulting firm or whether to start your own practice. I think that it really helps to understand that there are advantages to both. And really, honestly, I liked it both. I liked both ways. I've done both, and I gained valuable, very valuable experience in both settings. One of the primary advantages in working with a larger consulting firm is that they have credentials and they have established themselves in the field. They generally have a rock-solid reputation of getting the work done. And then there's also the relationship factor. As a member of a firm, you have a really wonderful opportunity to work in a variety of sectors with a variety of organizations and professionals. And as a field consultant, which I was, generally you will not be charged with marketing the firm's services and developing business for the firm. And I found that to be a really good plus. There's usually, in a large firm, there's an entire department or a team which handles marketing. But then on the other side, what about being on your own? The key to that is discipline. You have to be organized, and you really need to have a vision for where you want to be in the long term. Starting your own consulting firm is an ideal place for that rugged individualist. If that is your description, that's where you need to be. You make your own decisions as a consultant on your own. And above all, as a solo practice consultant, you really, really, really have to have a positive attitude. On the next slide, we'll talk about determining the route that you want to go if you want to join a firm. How do you get there? First, talk to other consultants. There's a lot of us around. I can't tell you how many times I run into people at AFP and at other nonprofit conferences that have been consultants with CCS. There are a lot of us around. The networking is key, especially at places like conferences. And as I mentioned earlier, I interviewed for my first consulting job during an AFP conference. The other thing that you need to understand is that you have to be flexible when you're working for a large firm. You will most likely travel a lot, and you may be away from home for months at a time. If that's something that doesn't really work for you, then maybe you should think about an alternative option. And the third important thing is to learn. If you decide to work for a consulting firm, you are really embarking on an amazing journey of educational experiences. And you can learn from your experiences as well as those of your fellow consultants. On the next slide, we'll talk about things that you need to think about if you'd like to start out on your own. If you really truly believe that you want to start your own consulting business, you need to think real carefully about what you would like to do research. Got to do the research. Ask for lots of advice from others who have also started their own firms. And again, have a positive attitude. Have that positive attitude and a vision of where you might want to be in 3 to 5 years. If you're good at multitasking and comfortable working alone, you definitely have some advantages here. And also, it's really important that when you get started, you need to have a reserve fund with living expenses for about 6 months, or maybe start consulting part-time while you're still employed. On the next slide, we talk about the biggest question. You need to think about, what type of consulting work do you really want to do? And also, what type of work do you absolutely not want to do? For me, I determined really early on that I did not want to handle special events. My interest and my talents were much more in the capital and endowment campaign areas, so those are really the areas in which I focus. But because board and committee training forms such an integral part of directing a capital campaign, that has also become one of my specialty areas. And lastly, I'm a firm believer in taking your shot. If becoming a consultant is what you want to do, you find yourself thinking about how you would help an organization reach its goals, then maybe consulting is the right path for you. And as Wayne Gretzky says, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Helen, we're just going to go right into you now because we're running a little bit late. So thank you so much, Lynn. I really appreciate that. So this is Helen. Helen, I'm going to unmute you and going to mute Lynn. And here you go, Helen. It's all you.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you, everyone. I have a lot to say, so I'll talk really fast since we're behind. I am a general purpose consultant, and I'm so excited to be with all these superstars on this webinar. It's so exciting. Linda is one of my mentors. I've known Dean for a while, Lynn Dean for a while, and Linda Lysakowski is a mentor. I should use last names because they're both Lynn's, Linda and Lynn. And they've been very, very valuable to me. I'm certainly the least known on this panel. However, I was just doing some math. I have been a volunteer or a consultant for 54 years. I keep saying 48 plus, but it's 54 years. Scared myself to death. I have been a contributing author on 2 Charity Channel books. You can read that. And I am finishing up volunteering for the Genius right now. And I agree with special events. I've done 1 million of them. And you could avoid them if you possibly can. Next slide, please. We're going to get into, I'm talking fast because there's a lot here. My job is to talk about your business plan. I know it's not glamorous. I know you would rather just get on with the work and do what you love to do. But if you don't figure out how you're going to incorporate and then organize what you're going to do, you're setting yourself up for failure. You want to set yourself up for success. Think through the process from the beginning to the end and write it down. Can it be changed? Of course. But when you have a plan, you have something that you can follow. So what I'm going to talk about is really developing a strategic plan for your profession. Next slide, please. Okay. Think about it as having in the very beginning an executive summary. You are going to write this. You're going to write last after you do everything else. But in your executive summary, put it in 2 pages or less. Put everything in it that you would cover in a 5-minute interview if you were being interviewed by a consulting company or a client, or if you're going to get financing by a bank. Explain what your business is. If you cannot explain it to somebody else, they're not going to understand it. And it will be very, very clear if you can't do it. Be enthusiastic, professional, complete, and concise. In your business, what services are you going to have? Who are your clients going to be? Are you going to specialize in churches? Are you only going to do startup nonprofits? You need to think that through. Your company description. What is your business? Now, I am a general service kind of consultant. I do everything from grant writing to setting up plan giving campaigns. I do feasibility studies. I do resource audits. I get bored, so I like to do a lot of different things. Or you can specialize, but know in advance what you're going to do. What are your company's goals and objectives? I know a company, their basic credo is do good, be good, or be good, do good. It depends on what they do that day. But it's very simple and it keeps you really focused. It's sort of a core value for them. To whom are you going to market your products? Do you want to really focus on larger nonprofits? Do you want to focus on a special kind of nonprofit? Do you want to limit yourself to youth-oriented? Do you want to do all kinds? Are you going to work outside of the country for nonprofits in other countries? You need to think all of that through. You need to also, in your description, highlight your strengths and your competencies. If you don't toot your own horn, nobody else is going to do it for you. And it's okay to tell people how good you are. Once you decide what your legal form is, and Tom was saying that he incorporated, I encourage incorporation. You can be a sole proprietor, a partnership, corporation, a limited liability, anything like that. In your products and services, you're going to want to list them. And then you are going to want, and for me, that lists everything I do. And if you only do feasibilities and capital campaigns and board training, or whatever. You want to list what you do. In your pricing, you need to think it through. You can price like Tom does by the hour. You can price by the project. If you're going to price by the project, back into it, figure out how many hours you think you're going to put into it. Be very precise about what is going to be included in that summary price for your client. And if it's going to go beyond that, you would want to put in extra services will be priced at this much per hour. I do both. I do not to exceed figures. Tom is absolutely right. You can really hurt yourself, and I did on more than one contract. So you learn as you go. Try to maybe put 30% more or 20% more in than you think you'll need, because in the end you will need it. I do grant writing. So in grant writing, I do price by the hour. I price one price for doing research, another price for meetings, and another price for writing time. With doing grants, I don't charge for the thinking time because there's no way to quantify it, and that's where the real work is done. So don't be shy. If you want to be reasonable, but you want to tell your clients that they are getting something of value. So do not underprice your stuff. All right. Then we're going to get into, thank you. We're going to get into the weeds, the stuff you're really going to hate to do, but you absolutely have to do if you want to be successful. Your operational plan. How are you going to operate? Where are you going to work? Are you going to work at home? Are you going to be, and this is really focused on if you are going to start your own company, and are you going to have people in it, or are you going to be a single entity? How are you going to operate? Are you going to operate out of your home office? Are you going to have an office downtown? Are you going to have one person working for you, nobody, 10 people? What does that look like? Know what you're going to do. What kind of personnel are you going to need? And that is something that you may work into over time. You may start alone. You may hire somebody after that. I know that there's a firm in Reno that helps writers, and they're all remote workers. They have a staff of 5, and they all work from their own home offices, but they work together. So it depends on what you want. Inventory. Doesn't that sound interesting? Why would you need inventory if you're a consultant? Okay, the inventory would include things like copiers. Do you need a copier? Of course you do. What kind of copier? Do you need a printer? Do you need a lot of office furniture? Are you going to have a conference room? All of this nitpicky, what I call in the weeds kind of details you have to think about because they all cost money. Suppliers. Who are going to be your suppliers? There are hard costs you're going to have, even office things. Set up accounts and establish relationships for any suppliers. Your credit policies. How are you going to manage your accounts receivable? How are you going to manage your accounts payable? You need to think that through. You'll need an accountant for that. On a day-to-day basis, are you the only person in the office? How are you going to manage that? Who's going to answer the phone? Because a lot of your job is going to be going out and bringing in business. That takes time, that takes attention, that takes networking, that takes a lot of being out of the office. If you're sitting in your chair waiting for customers to come to you or clients to come to you, it may take a long time. If not, if you're going to have somebody live in your office, how is that person going to have background? Are you going to be able to depend on that person for more than answering the phone, or are you going to want simply a phone answering service? You need to sort that out and figure out what will work for you. And this is a good one, and if you're working alone, it can happen. What happens if you get ill? What happens if you're unable to continue business? Is there a continuation plan or a contingency plan if something happens to you and you're alone? Is there somebody who's willing to take over your work? You want to think that through. If you're going to have employees, you're certainly going to need an this is so boring for a lot of people, but it's so important, an organizational chart so everybody knows where they fit and how they work and how the workflow is going to go. if you are going for a loan at a bank, and that can happen, you are going to need job descriptions for everybody, and you're going to need resumes of key people. And you need, all right, slow down, Mazarine. You need a crew, and both Tom and Lynn have talked about this. You need people you can fall back on. Are you going to have a board of directors? Some do, some don't, or advisory board. You need an attorney, an accountant, an insurance agent, a banker, and you need a whole stable full of friendly consultants you can call and say, help, how do I do this? What do you think about this? You need your mentors, you need your key advisors. You cannot get along without them. Go to all of the conferences you can go to, establish those relationships if you don't already have them. Those are just incredibly important and will make or break you being successful. Okay. This slide is really oriented to if you are going to go get a bank loan. You do need, Lynn is correct, you absolutely have to have cash in the bank to start this business. Even if you have clients at the door the first day, there's a delay in billing and a delay in payment. And you're going to have to pay your bills and go to the grocery store. So plan for that. There's startup expenses, there are capitalization expenses. You need a financial plan. Try to figure out what your hard costs are going to be, your standard costs every month, and what you are going to need to break even before you pay yourself, and then figure out what you'd like to pay yourself. It's going to be more, some months that's going to be less, but there really should be a floor, and you should have a very clear idea of what that amount is going to be. If you can do a 12-month projection, that's very hard when you're starting up a business. That would be great. 6 months is pretty important. You have to at least get to 6 months. And the important part of it too is figure out your marketing plan. And I know Linda's going to go into it a little. Your marketing plan has to be multi-dimensional. You have to be able to reach out to the clients you want to reach. Figure out where they are and how you're going to get to them. And that could be through friends. It could be something as simple as direct mail, which has a very low return but can get some return. Social media, mouth to mouth, is by far the best. If you have people you've worked with, have them start talking about you and encouraging people to call you. And client referrals are very, very strong. Okay, next slide. Okay. When you're supporting a request or you're making a presentation to a client, you want your advertising materials. Letters of support are huge. They make all the difference in some presentations. If you've done your market research, if you're going out for support on a loan, your lender is going to want to know that you understand where you fit in your universe and how your business is going to work and how you're going to pay that money back. That's really, really going to be important to a banker or a lender. And if you are going for a loan, you have to have some kind of assets for collateral. Again, incorporate so you're protected. Word of warning, if you're going to get an SBA loan to do this, though your personal assets are not protected. You will have to sign personally as well as corporately. And if you are in a gorgeous historic building, put it on the front of your presentation. The last thing, which is really, really, really important, and you'll figure that out if it doesn't work for you, you need to know in your office how things are going to be handled. It's simple as when a check comes in, how is it going to be handled? If you're all yourself, if you have an accountant, set up a process with the accountant. How are you going to handle income, outgo, billing, all of that? And security, everything. Take it all into consideration, because if there's a hole in it somewhere, you're bound to find it, and you're bound to find it at a time you don't need it. Your accountant should be one of your best friends, and they should give you really, really, really good advice. If you can get a monthly fee from them, that's going to cost you less than if you have to do emergency crisis control with them. So keep that in mind. Okay, last slide is what every consultant doesn't want to do and has to. If you are working in a state that requires registration consultants, you have to register if you're going to work in that state. Not all states require it, but most do. They are not the same states necessarily that require nonprofit organizational state registrations. In some states, you're going to be required to post a bond, particularly if you are soliciting money. If you're making calls on a capital campaign, for sure you're going to need a bond in almost every state. The states call your role different things, and they mean different things. Advisor, solicitor, fundraiser, consultant, grant writer, commercial co-venturer, they're all different. So be sure to go to the state and get your research done. That would be, and it'll vary from state to state. It'll Secretary of State, the State Treasurer, the Department of Ag in Florida, the Attorney General, the different regions, provinces in Canada, each have their own way to do this. There are fees in some states. There are not fees in other states. Some states require a client contract in advance. Washington, D.C., the organization has to register, and then the organization has to supply the consulting contract, and then every employee of the consulting firm has to get this little card in their name that they carry around with them that they have to be able to show at every time they meet with anybody. It's very, very interesting. Some require annual renewal, some don't. Investigate before you price a contract. Find out, because you want to build that cost in, and sometimes you have to register before the contract is signed, and sometimes you cannot register without a signed contract. So plan that in advance. Build the time in to your bid or your proposal. Okay, I think that's my piece. Did I talk fast enough to catch up?
Oh, you did. You were wonderful, Helen.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
I really appreciate that. We do have a question about marketing, but I think we're having a marketing presentation from Susan later on, and we'll keep this other question to the end as well. It's about how to get a bond to work on capital campaigns, but I think we can table that until the end as well. So we'll keep going.
Okay, I have answers for both. Go ahead.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, so we'll come back to you, Ted. So Linda, you are up. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm going to unmute you so you can talk. And thank you so much, Helen.
Okay, thanks. Well, I'm going to try to get through my part real quickly. I'm not going to bore you with my details. You can read that on the slide. But I wanted to say that I really started my business probably the way I would never recommend anybody starting your own consulting practice. And I love Tom's description of he got so good he got fired, because I did too. And I had a couple months on my hand while I was debating if I wanted to look for another job. And I went to speak at an AFP conference in Atlanta, Georgia. I came home all excited about the fact that so many people were there wanting to learn about how to start a development program. Then I thought maybe I should stop thinking about looking for work and I should start thinking about being a consultant. And I got home and promptly got sick with a horrible case of bronchitis. So I was in my bed for about a month. But while I was in my bed, one day I was feeling better, and I did exactly what Helen suggested. I got out of bed, crawled out of the bed, and went to my computer and wrote a business plan. And as soon as I was well enough, I took that business plan to an accountant that I knew and said, can you help me get this business started? So I think it's one of the things that I have found. I've been consulting for almost 25 years now. And I found that if there's anything certain in this business, it's change. And I wanted to kind of share with you the themes that I'm talking about, because in my case, I changed my scope of everything I did over the 25 years. Somebody already mentioned that there's different types of consulting that you can do. And like some of the others, I always have decided to stay away from things like grant writing and special events, just because I didn't like doing them. Although I love writing, I never liked grant writing. And I knew I didn't know enough about planned giving. And at the time when I started my business, I thought, well, everybody does capital campaigns, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to work with organizations that really need to start a development program. And I quickly found out two things. One is that didn't pay very much because the kind of organizations that really needed to get started in development didn't have the funds to put into a consultant. But I also found out that there were a lot of small organizations and organizations that didn't have full-time staff people, but yet they needed a capital campaign. So I switched my focus into more of capital campaigns. And now I'm doing what Tom indicated on one of his slides. I've become pretty much a virtual consultant. I have very few clients now. I spend most of my time writing and teaching, but the clients I do have, I work with almost all of them virtually. I don't get out and do much more consulting just because of some personal issues. I have never decided to be a single focus client, but there are some people who really love healthcare and they only want to work in healthcare environments, or they've only had experience in higher education and that's what they really like, or maybe they really enjoy the arts. For me, I'm like, I think it was Helen who said she gets bored easily. I do too. And so I always like the mix of, I've worked with religious groups, I've worked with human services, probably predominantly. I've worked with higher education, I've worked with the arts. But once you make up your mind to do something, you don't have to do it forever. You can go into this thinking, I'm only going to do capital campaigns for higher education. And then all of a sudden somebody asks you to do something different than that, and you're doing it and you find out, hey, I really like this. The same thing with a one-person shop, and again, this is directed to those of you starting your own businesses. Some people work really well by themselves. Other people don't. They find that they really have to work as a team. They really need that input from someone else. I personally have always worked better alone, but I did at one time have several employees, and then I realized quickly that one of the reasons I got out of a development office was because I hated managing people. So why was I managing them in my consulting practice? So now I'm again by myself. And again, once you start with something, you don't have to stay with it. That, I think, is the one thing that I'd like you to take away from this, that you can change. That's the glory about being a consultant. You can't maybe write your own job description within an organization, but you can as a consultant. You can go from being a one-person shop to being a large firm, or vice versa. On the next slide, we're talking about not just the types of consultants, but where you want to work, and several people have already raised this issue. But again, this is something that can change too. There are a lot of advantages and disadvantages of having a home office. And you're always there. That's both an advantage and a disadvantage, in my opinion. I like the fact that if I get inspired and as I'm laying in bed, I can come out and go to the computer and put down some ideas on paper, I'm always there. But the disadvantage of it is you're always there. You never get away from it. I remember one consultant I read about early on in my consulting business, and she said every morning she worked at home, but every morning she got up, took a shower, got dressed, and walked around the block, and then came back to her office as though she was commuting back and forth to work, just to give her the feeling that she wasn't in her own home. You can work in casual clothes. I think I'm probably sitting here now in sneakers and shorts, as many of us consultants do, sometimes in your pajamas. And of course, working at home is going to save you not only money, but travel time. There are also some advantages and disadvantages of having what we call a real office. There is a prestige involved in this. And when I started my business, day one, I went out and rented an office and hired a staff person, which is probably crazy because I had one signed contract, which barely paid my rent and the other person's salary. So I didn't get paid for quite a while. But I like the prestige of having an office where I could meet with people. Now, I would probably never go back to that again because I just enjoy working at home so much. There is a cost involved, of course, to having a real office, and that's something that you're going to need to factor in. But it does give you the ability to meet your clients in a more professional setting. However, what I find, and this didn't exist when I started my business, now the virtual office is a great thing for many consultants. They will get an office for $100, $200 a month. I mean, and they have limited use. You can get someone just to answer your phones and collect your mail. You can have an actual office there, or you can just have the ability to use a meeting room when you want to. There are a lot of different options in the virtual office, so that might be something that many of you might consider. I've also talked to people who have worked in another consultant's office that maybe is in an unrelated field. Maybe it's a marketing company, but they rent a space in that marketing company and have their office there. So there's all different types of options, and again, you're not locked into any. You might decide, why am I paying rent for this office when I'm never here? I'm always out at a client. And maybe you might decide to go back into working at home, or maybe you're working at home and you find that you have so many distractions that you just can't continue doing that. You have to get away. So where you work can change. The other thing is your geographic focus on the next slide. And this might also change very rapidly. When I started out, I was pretty much local. I had a lot of contacts locally, and then I became regional through my AFP connections, and eventually national and international. And now, as I said, I'm mostly virtual. So all of those are options. The one thing that you do need to caution about as you grow is exactly what Helen talked about. The state registration can be a real killer if you're working in 6 different states and you have to register in every one of them. It can be quite an expense, and you need to build that expense into the client contracts when you're drawing up those contracts, because if you're working in New York State, for example, where you have to pay, I think it was $800 the last time I checked, it might be more now, but if you're paying that much a year to register, that's an expense that you're going to have to take into consideration when you're figuring how much it's going to cost you to work with this particular client. I really think there's a huge future in virtual consulting with things like GoToMeeting and all the different products that are available out there. I actually right now have a client in Mexico. I've been to their office once or twice, but now I do it all virtually. The last thing is, what do you call your company? This is a big
Linda,
thing.
We seem to have lost you. Are you there?
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me?
Because I can't hear you.
Oh, no. Oh, gosh.
No, we don't hear you. Well, you might want to try calling in, Linda. And while we're waiting for you to do that, let's see here. Oh, you can hear her. Oh, great. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Wonderful.
Okay, so
you're fine. Excellent.
I just have this one last slide, and then I'll turn it over.
In that case, for some reason I can't hear her, so I will see what I can do about that. Thank you, guys.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, hopefully the rest of you can hear me, and I just have this one more slide, and then we'll turn it over to Susan. A rose by any other name, I call this, because I think this is always a challenge for people. So what do I call my company? And when I started out, this is another thing that in my case has changed 3 times. I didn't want to use my name because I thought, who the heck is going to probably. Some people really feel strongly about using their name. Others would rather have another company. My company originally was called Cornerstone Consulting Incorporated, and then I realized that it was a name that a lot of faith-based organizations were using, and they thought I only worked with faith-based groups. And I also changed the focus of my business to go into more capital campaigns. So then I changed not only my name, but the way I was incorporated as a subchapter S originally. And then when I changed my name to Capital Venture, I was a partnership with another consultant in a neighboring state. And now I went back to choosing my name because I thought, well, now everybody in this field probably knows who Linda Lysakowski is, and I became an LLC. So you can change your names. In our books, one consultant said you have got to pick a name and stick with it. I'm living proof that that isn't always necessarily the case. So I did change my name several times, and I'm happy with what I'm doing, and I think I've probably exhausted my time, so I'm going to turn it over to Susan. I hope that Nazarene can hear me and take over the reins from here.
Oh, yes, definitely. I just switched again back to my computer, so thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Okay.
Thank you. So now it's all you, Susan. Thank you so much.
Terrific. Thank you. And I have to say to those of you on the line, you have been given some terrific guidance so far about your futures in consulting. I mean, I really think that everybody has just been spot on. And I'll add a little bit to what they've said. I hope you'll stick with us a little bit past the hour, because I'm hoping that we'll tie things together and then get your questions answered. I founded my consulting firm in 2001. I had a career in higher education. I was mostly working with national foundations doing fundraising. So you can imagine it was a fairly specific field. And I was really antsy to do some things that were more general. But the farther I went in my career, the more people knew me as this national foundations person and eventually expert. And it was wonderful. And yet I was antsy to do more. So my consulting firm, I thought, would give me that opening to do more. And it turns out that I've learned to embrace it and still do about half of my work in that realm. I've also written a number of books because in one of them specifically, there just wasn't enough information about consulting. So as a matter of fact, this consulting book was co-edited with Linda, and Helen was a contributor. There really is not a lot still that's offered for consultants. So again, the information you're getting today is valuable and still somewhat rare. I've also been a restless fundraiser and otherwise nonprofit staffer, so the opportunity to write and edit books and articles and whatnot has been terrific. My latest book is on serving on nonprofit boards. It's a book for board members, and that's been another way to get myself known in an area that I've found very rewarding as both a volunteer and a consultant. So as you can see, the threads from many of us, writing is often an integral part and a part of marketing we'll talk about. It's worth mentioning too, and I appreciate Marzanne's opportunity to let us mention that I'm doing some in-person consulting, workshops around consulting. If you're in the DC area, May 13th and 14th, we're doing a 2-day workshop, which is coming to a few other cities, Baltimore so far, possibly Atlanta, and maybe we're working on New York, so feel free to reach out if you're interested in attending a 2-day intensive workshop on becoming a nonprofit consultant. So with that, you can imagine all of these pieces, of course, writing and teaching, all get to the idea that marketing is key when you are consulting. And it's, as Helen said in her business plan talk, first figuring out your target market is so key. I'll go through this quickly because she did cover a good deal of it. But figuring out your niche is, of course, very important. Again, groups that do capital campaign council will be marketing very different types of organizations potentially than, and especially very different staffers than consultants who focus on, say, strategic planning or technical support. Finally, next, the geographic region, as Linda said, also plays very heavily into where and how you will market, as we'll get to in a minute. And then it is important to focus on the characteristics of the clients you like, the type of organization. Here where I am in DC, for instance, there are a number of folks who focus on association work. And there are others who focus on, all over the country, on grassroots organizations, for instance. And another local specialty is groups that deal with advocacy. So those kinds of focuses for your consulting practice will really start determining where you're going to market and what sorts of people you need to reach. If your focus is grassroots, for instance, you'll be focusing your marketing really on the executive directors because they're the ones with the decision-making authority. Whereas if you're working for large associations or universities, you might instead be marketing to deans or to vice presidents of programs or the like. Mission, of course, is another piece. There are plenty of consultants who choose to really specialize in something like higher education or arts or even social services. I, for one, was somebody who was excited about broadening my my experience with other missions. I had been in higher ed for so long that at this point, after consulting for 15 years, my thrill in consulting is really learning about all of the different missions that are out there. So I really enjoy that diversity, but plenty of people become known for their emphasis on one particular type of mission. And then, as I alluded to, the size of the organization is important as well if you want a small, mid-size, or very large group. It's also important, as Helen alluded to look at your competition. If the landscape is really crowded, and Linda said this too, if it's really crowded or difficult to make a living as a consultant in certain fields, you do want to consider the marketplace before you put your stake out in a particular field. Okay, so we can look at the next slide, and it's coming slowly on my screen. There's a list of marketing options here, and we won't go through all of them. Some of them are more obvious than others. They're not in any particular order on this list, but I think what I'll do is touch on those that are maybe some of the less obvious marketing options. I'll be honest, the few I did put at the end, things that might seem like no-brainers, advertising and listings in directories. In my conversations with consultants, those have tended to be some of the lesser effective modes of marketing for consulting. Some of the pieces that work particularly well for new consultants are things like subcontracting, of all things. Why might that be? I think someone earlier in the hour mentioned that other consultants are just fabulous connectors. They also tend to be very generous. So it's a great thing to be able to connect with other folks and even work with them. So can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, you cut out a little bit, but we can hear you now.
Okay, terrific, thanks. At any rate, the reason that subcontracting can be so valuable for new consultants is that it puts you in a very intimate working relationship with not only clients, but other consultants. And you can ask most consultants, and they will tell you that not only, as Tom mentioned, are consultants very generous in terms of their information for each other, but they're also very generous in terms of referring other consultants. We've got a fabulous network in the DC area, for instance, of consultants who are regularly passing jobs back and forth to people. You've heard a number of folks, presenters on the call today, talk about their disinterest in special events. That can be pervasive, as well as disinterest in grant writing or a number of other things. Well, if you've got a terrific list of people you know who do fabulous work in those areas, then there's nothing that feels better as a consultant than the ability to refer what you know to be a stellar colleague. So it does allow you to get to know other consultants and allow them to refer you. That said, having a good referral network is really important. And what do I mean by that? There are people in your network currently who are very likely connected on a large scale to people who can get you jobs. There seem to be several in everybody's network, people who number one, enjoy connecting folks to each other. Number two, are senior enough to know decision makers at organizations. And number three, are just very generous in the time and effort they put into listening to your current efforts and what you'd like to do next. So it's definitely worth it when you're going through, say, your business planning to sit down and think a little bit about who are the people I know who can really position me well within my market. And if you don't have those in your network, it's worth, as I think it was Tom who mentioned, picking up the phone and calling a few people who you may not know well, but you think can give you that entree. It's really what got my career off to a great start. I'll say that it's probably the number two thing. Number one was having worked at a large organization with many former colleagues who were at that point out and doing other work in other cities, and they brought me in as their consultant. And the second best network for me initially was this group of people I knew who just were so generous and excited about passing along my name. It really kept my business going for probably the first 4 or 5 years. So think about things like that. Again, I think others this hour have mentioned many of these other pieces, testimonials and speaking, obviously, teaching, all of these pieces that are somewhat obvious. Get your name out there and get people familiar with what it is you're good at, or just the fact that you're a credible name if you're a generalist. The one piece I will emphasize a bit is your website. It seems sometimes a little passe now that we're on to other technologies, social media and such, but I still regularly get clients through my website, and I am the first to admit that my website is absolutely far from the most glitzy, high-functioning website there is. But as a matter of fact, I even have one international client in Switzerland that compared a number of consultants via their websites, and then did some interviews, and I got the job that way. So it's still a key piece of marketing. On the next slide, you'll see that given the fact that there are so many marketing options, really the best way to go is to focus on just a couple that really highlight your skills and, maybe as importantly, your interests. As you can see, if you have having a website, I'd say, should be up there. But in terms of other things, in terms of writing books and speaking and social media, it really helps, particularly at the beginning, to pick 1 or 2 of these outlets and just focus, because let's face it, we could spend our whole day marketing if we went through all of these pieces. It's great to become, to really polish yourself in a few areas, and you'd be surprised how well that strategy can work. When social media was really becoming popular, I have to admit I didn't do much of it. I still don't do a whole lot of it, and people were constantly encouraging me to do more social media. In the end, I read a couple of books. I'm an avid reader, as I think Tom also encouraged, and there was a book I found that really fit my own personality on this issue, and said, you know what, if you don't do social media, it's okay. I mean, you'll get certain types of clients through it and other times without it. And frankly, my business has been plenty steady, and I have the luxury of often picking the jobs that work well for me. So until I really need to, I probably won't spend at least a huge amount of time on it. We all need to do it to some degree, but it's a way of saying that there's no piece other than maybe at least some kind of simplistic website, anything that you really need to do. So find what works for you and do it well. I would also say that that sometimes you can just get noticed for things that you've done, and you never know where it will take you. So it could bring you to another place. Sometimes you'll speak somewhere, and then someone asks you to write an article about something you've done. So it can present opportunities. Another reason to really polish whatever it is you feel that you're strong at. And the next slide, you'll see that you pick a couple of these pieces, you polish them well, and in the end, word of mouth is really where we all thrive throughout our careers, regardless of the technology du jour. There is nothing like getting someone to talk about you in a strong way, and really the success of your personal consulting practice is likely to be determined in large part by a couple of things. Number one, how many of your clients are going to call you back to do a different project at a different time. If you can get to that point in your consulting, then you're at a fabulous place because there's less time you need to spend marketing. It's an organization you already know, you've already developed relationships, and the next step from that would be to have organizations refer you to other organizations. And obviously when you get to that point as well, you know you've done a good job, you know that your name is getting out there, and again, less marketing is more time doing the consulting. So word of mouth is still really the best way to go. It's low tech, we can all strive for that. And it's great to also just put the word out there yourself so that when you're talking to potential clients, former clients, and really anyone in the field, to let them know that you would appreciate, now that they know what you've done or what the kind of work you're doing, you'd love for them to put word out there about your work within their own circles. So that way you can help perpetuate the word of mouth. Finally, I believe the consulting book that Linda and I put together, Linda has arranged for a terrific discount for those of you on the line. This was quickly a series of essays written by some of the leading consultants in the country and the nonprofit sector. And we asked them to submit short essays on all of the topics you've heard today: marketing and setting up your business, naming your business, the financial side, setting fees. And what we love about this, and to bring our presentation full circle, I think it was Tom who started out by saying that there's no cookie cutter practice. And in our book, we emphasize the idea that there is no one path to success. It is so true. And in this book, we do choose a lot of essays that contradict each other so that you can see how each consultant succeeds regardless of the way they approached a particular problem. So you can hear their success stories and figure out your own personal vision and set of values as you move forward. So good luck to all of you, and thanks so much for hanging in there with us today. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much, Susan, and everybody else here. We have now time for questions. I'm going to unmute everybody. So everybody who wants to answer these questions can go in and do it. And we do actually have a few questions here. And one person asked, can I get a discount on any books that you'd recommend? Obviously, we've already answered that question. So that's set. And let's go back up a little bit. And so what we're looking at is somebody wanted to know, how much do I charge per hour? And I know some people have talked about this, like double it, 30% on top. So if anybody here wants to share how much they charge per hour, feel free. Otherwise, what do you think we should charge, as we are starting out, a beginner in consulting?
Yeah, actually, this formula for how much to charge per hour. What does it go back to? Okay, so you have to decide how much money you need in a month to get by or to prosper, and then you divide that by 4 weeks and divide that by 40, and that's how you come up with your hourly rate. And it grows. Well, it might grow over time. I personally kept increasing my hourly rate because I wanted to work fewer hours and yet make the same amount of money. So over time, it went from what was conventional when I started, about $50, $60 an hour, to what I charge today, which is $250 an hour. And that gives me exactly the right clients, because not everybody can afford it.
That's true. This is Helen. And you're right. You have to back into it based on what you need to break even and make money so you can live. I will give you a for instance, and you can use it however you want. If it's too high, too low, figure it out. When I write for grants, And let me just emphasize, you never get paid a percentage of the grant. That's not ethical. You have to be paid a fee or an hourly rate based on your contract. I charge $75 an hour for research. I charge $100 an hour for meetings, and I charge $200 an hour for actually writing the grant.
And this is Linda. I was going to say that even though I hardly ever work on an hourly basis. It's always a project basis, but you have to have that hourly figure in your head. So my rate when I do work on the hour is usually $250 an hour as well. But if I'm going to work on a project basis, I sit down and figure out how many hours I think it's going to take. It usually takes more, but I try to estimate the amount of hours and then multiply those hours by 250 to get a project-based fee. So but I think it's different depending, as Helen said, on the kind of work you're doing. If you're writing grants or if you're doing training, so sometimes it's more than that depending on what I'm doing.
And if I do feasibilities or anything else, for me, I do a project price as well, like Linda does. It's only I only charge hourly for the grant writing.
Right, excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Another person asked, should he focus on his website first, a Facebook page, LinkedIn profile? Is there anything that you'd recommend as a first place to start for online presence for marketing?
This is Linda. I would probably start with, go ahead. I was going to say I would start with the website, but as far as social media goes, I think LinkedIn is excellent because it does put you in touch with the professional network more than some of the others. So not that the others don't, but I think LinkedIn is more specific to business people.
Mm-hmm.
This is Susan. I agree with Linda, probably because we've spoken together so often on this topic. But I think the one thing I would add to that is it also depends on the type of consulting you want to do. If you want to, for instance, do a lot of online-based consulting or teaching or other things that are virtual, you might choose to build a market via Twitter first or Facebook, where your virtual clients will reside. And again, if you really just want to do things locally, you'll focus on the pieces Linda mentioned, and then maybe some speaking and some things with a more local slant to them.
This is Helen. You're going to want to find, no matter what you do, find a way to capture the people who are clicking on you. And that way you can blog out to them directly, or you can tweet to them directly, or whatever that looks like. So try and capture as much information about people who are curious about you so you can recontact them.
I like that, and that's very true, very true. If you have a newsletter, people will most likely remember that you exist. I think most of the people at this conference found out about this conference because I sent them a newsletter. So that's just a place to start. Obviously, it works. And I'll tell you, when I first started out, I didn't have a website. It was all word of mouth. I didn't even have a business card. But now I would think that is completely essential because there's way more competition in the space. And if you want to differentiate yourself, a website and your LinkedIn profile are both really good places to do that. I totally agree with all of you.
Yeah, this is Lynn, and I would also agree that the website is really, really important. And I started out, and my daughter did my website, and she did a great job, but then I realized that I really needed to take it to the next level. And so I connected with the website designer, and I also agree that LinkedIn is wonderful. And even especially for fundraising consulting, they will find you if you have CFRE after your name.
Yeah, and one person asked, how do you get your CFRE accreditation, or how do you get in with AFP? If you go to CFRE International, you can get that accreditation. And AFP's website, I don't remember the name of it, but if you look up Association of Fundraising Professionals, you can find it for your region.
Yeah, AFPnet.org is the national, and there should be something on there about the ACFRE. They don't manage the CFRE process anymore. That's CFRE International. But you can probably find the ACFRE there.
And CFRE is CFRE.org.
Yeah, CFRE.org. That's got the whole scoop on certified CFRE and ACFRE.
One person asked, when you register as a consultant, is it based on income? Do you have to register if you make above a certain amount, or is it just like you have to register no matter what?
It depends on the state. You have to register in most states, and in most states there are fees, and in most states there are bonds you have to post. Your insurance company, which is your other person you need to get with, will be able to take care of the bonding issue.
And this is Linda. It's usually not based on your income as a consultant.
No.
It's based on whether or not you're contracting with a client in their state, or whether you're soliciting people in their state. The other thing that's important to know is your client may be required to register in a state that they're not located in if they're soliciting funds there. So like Nevada is a little more loosey-goosey with their registration requirements, but a lot of people here are raising money in California, so they need to register in California, not the consultant, but the client. And it behooves you as a consultant to understand the registration that the client needs to go through, because some clients that are new to fundraising are not aware of all these guidelines.
I will emphasize, if you are raising funds in California, by golly, get registered there. Because
you're not kidding.
Just trust me on this. Get registered there.
All right. Caitlin asked, how open or interested are you in mentoring people who are just starting out in the consulting field? How would one go about getting a mentor?
This is Helen. AFP has a mentor list. I'm on it. All you have to do is go to afpnet.org and link to the mentoring page and select somebody near you or somebody who specializes in what you want. And it's, as Susan said, this is a very, very generous industry, and people do help each other all the time. So, or go to your AFP chapter meetings, go anywhere, establish a relationship and ask for help. Never be shy about picking up the phone.
Right. A lot of local chapters have their own mentoring programs. I know I mentored somebody who was new to consulting through my local chapter, so that's another possibility too.
I love that. Well, everybody, we're really run over time now here, over 22 minutes off time, and I want to respect people's time, and people are slowly leaving. So thank you so much for staying on extra time. I really appreciate it. And I'm just so grateful to you for all that you've done today. It's incredible. So I just want to share with people, this is tomorrow's schedule here, and it's going to be a lineup starting at 9 a.m. PT and 12 p.m. ET. So we're going to start with Abby Haggerty, finding the best fundraising job for you via her research, talking investment satisfaction and work, developing better boundaries, your nonprofit work and your health, and how to make your fundraising workflow into productivity success. So that's what we've got for coming up tomorrow. And thank you so much again for coming today. And thank you everybody for presenting today. I really, really appreciate it. You did such a good job and such good questions too for everybody who came. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.